There is something truly special about the first essay that Rav Hirsch gives us in the month of Sivan. He goes through so many concepts, so many ideas, so many frameworks that can be applied to our lives directly. And I hope I do it justice. So what are we doing? We're talking about the month of Sivan, and we're talking specifically about the festival, or the Chag of Shavuos, Zman Matan Torasenu. And Rav Hirsch asks a very simple question. Why no pomp and fanfare? Why no matzah? Why no moror? Why no shofar? Why no sukkah? Why no symbol? Why no decoration? Why no something specific for the month, the festival of the giving of the Torah? I mean, you would kind of expect to hear it in bucket loads. I don't know, a golden Torah that we would dance around. Okay, perhaps that's a little bit silly for many reasons, but think about it. There's something very bizarre. It's the festival that's supposed to symbolize the Torah, and we have nothing. There's no symbol there. There's no way of us connecting to it. There's no framework for us to live within. There are specific korbanos that were given in the temple, and we will get to that. But from the point of view of an individual, there's nothing. How can this be the case? That's Rav Hirsch's opening. And on the basis of that, he gives a definition of Judaism that sidelines and dodges all the classical accusations that religions get. And Rav Hirsch is begging us to do our best to not allow Judaism to fit into the classical framework of religion. Now, let's begin. I'm Simi Lerner, and this is the Judaism from Within podcast, the podcast where we go through the thoughts and the perspectives of Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch. Rav Hirsch's first move is to tell us Judaism is not a religion. Now, let's remember, we're not doing that sort of classic Kiruv apologetics move, where the person goes to the atheist and says, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. First of all, often when that is said, that is precisely what the theist means, and the atheist knows that. But what Rav Hirsch is doing here is a little bit different. He's showing us that if we take Judaism as a religion, it then will fall into all the other subcategories that religion has part of it. And thereby we have to start defending and explaining Judaism in the context of a framework that it doesn't belong. And what Rav Hirsch does is go through different categories like theology, like tradition, divine worship, belief and action, symbolism, and how when we look at it through the lens of classical religions, we wonder why Judaism doesn't keep up to date, why Judaism acts in such a strange way. What do we expect of Judaism? But when Rav Hirsch says if we redefine our concepts at the beginning, if we look back to our first principle, what emerges is profoundly different. So let's begin. What is a religion? Rav Hirsch understands a religion as something that emerges from the people. Now, this isn't a truth claim, necessarily. This is just in terms of concept. What do you claim to be? Judaism's claim is that you had a nation that stood around a mountain. It was quite distinct from them. They weren't allowed to touch it, and that symbolically is important. Not only from their standpoint, or from the narrative standpoint, it doesn't come from them. That is imperative for them to understand, and for us to understand reading it later on. It came to them. It didn't emerge from them. It wasn't one person who came and told them what the religion was. It didn't emerge from a priestly class. It was given to the people. That's how they understood it on the ground. It was imparted to them from the outside, rather than emerging from them. Now, once again, this isn't a point of truth, because the classical pushback I get is that, well, arguments and what do people think other religions are true or not true, that's not what's going on here. Rav Hirsch is pointing out that Judaism is different in a specific way. It's different in a way that it claims that the system came from the outside and imposed itself on the people. And evidence to this is that Judaism never lived up to the expectations of the Torah, and it holds that in pride in a certain way. We emphasize our failures. We talk about our failures. We talk about the Jewish people's inability to live up to the realities of the Torah, the expectations of the Torah. You contrast this with other worldviews. Accepting the religion is often considered you're successful. Take Islam and Christianity. How do you not live in line with the expectations of Christianity? You accept Jesus, and then you're part of the story. Same with Islam. Obviously, there are rules and regulations, but within Judaism, it's very different. You're a Jew to begin with. You don't become a Jew by accepting it. Being a Jew means there's something expected of you. That's not classical religion. I hope I'm emphasizing this enough. That's the move Rav Hirsch is making here. When you look at other worldviews, you see religions. When you see Judaism, you see the Torah, which is different. And to give you some examples about how this plays itself out, in classical religion, you have the internal state, which is important. Do you believe in God? Do you love God? Have you submitted to Allah? Do you fear the gods? And then you express that in a physical action. For example, you carry around a cross with you. But that's a mantle. It's not essential. I mean, the cross can be beautiful. The crescent moon can be meaningful. And you can jingle around some beads. But the essential part is the internal structure. That's what matters to religions. Judaism is completely different. Rav Hirsch points out our legal code mirrors this. A person comes along and tells you, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God, and I'm going to write a book about it. No one cares. I mean, maybe some people will care, but the law doesn't care. The legal system doesn't even validate that as a point of view. We're not interested, because today you don't believe, and tomorrow you might believe. Your internal state is whimsical. But if you break Shabbos, if you take the sacred symbol of the law of the Torah and you break it, you're fracturing the essential part, which is not man's inner thoughts represented by a symbol. For Judaism, it's divine symbolism that is supposed to impart and structure man. So if you mess with the symbol, you're messing with the source code here. You're messing with the source code in the sense that you will damage future generations' abilities to transform. You've got it inverted. For Judaism, the divine is on the symbolism, and the internal structure and the internal change is what is supposed to manifest from that. If it does, yay. If it doesn't, you don't disregard the symbol. That's why Judaism is so fundamentally different when it comes to a person saying, well, listen, I understand your rituals, they're nice, but I will be a good person. I will believe in God. I will love God. And the Torah is like, you've kind of missed the point. You've assumed this is a religion, and then you're acting towards it based off that assumption. But let's go further. You've dealt with action. Now let's deal with the intellect. What do religions have? Well, religions have a theology. The nature of God. Well, look, this is obviously going to be slightly controversial, and I'm sure different appreciations of Rav Hirsch will take this in a different way, but I'm going to take one route specifically. Judaism doesn't have a theology. Or at least, it doesn't have a meaningful theology. There is nowhere in the Torah or in the Talmud that describes the upper workings of the celestial worlds, and you have to know this to be a good Jew. Well, other religions most certainly have that. They have a theological hierarchy. They have an elite class of those who can understand the ins and outs of the divine worlds. Yes, Judaism has a Kabbalistic tradition, but it is by no means essential, and by no means are you required to know it or even take it and incorporate it into your life. For some people, they find it meaningful, but it is by no means a requirement. That is not the case with other religions. You have an elitist class, the people who understand the goings of the gods, the people who understand the theology. They write books about it, they do reflections about it, and to be the best Christian or to be the best Muslim, you need to be a theologian. Within Judaism, you don't. And Rav Hirsch says, once again, you've gone down the road of the intellect and you're looking for your theological structures within Judaism and the elite class who can best explain it to you, and it's lacking. And you're wondering where it is. And the answer is because you assumed it was a religion. Every Jew is required to learn the Torah. How sad, he says, when a father goes, oh, my child won't be studying Torah because he doesn't want to be a rabbi. How absurd. Every Jew is required to study the Torah. Every Jew is required to be part of this mission. And every Jew is educated to be in that frame. So, once again, you've mislabeled it, and thereby you've misunderstood it. But let's go further. Divine worship. Well, you go to your temple and you worship. That's where you do your religion. You go to your pagan shrine. You go to your enclave and you do your religion, and then you get on with life. Within Judaism, it's not like that either. Yes, we have a synagogue, but it's nowhere near as important as the Bet Midrash, where you study the law. A synagogue is where you practice, where you live out your religious life in a practice way, like the training area before you go into life, which is where you live out your religion. There's no religious worship. Even prayer has a fundamentally different framework than it does for other religions. Without going into the details, because Rav Hirsch develops it, and I don't want this podcast to be too long, but even the area of worship, you assume Judaism has its worship, in which case you go to temple to do your worship. And Rav Hirsch says you've missed the mark completely. Jewish living out of Judaism happens in your life. And Rav Hirsch explains to us when we forget this, we start beautifying our synagogues in a way to try and mirror other cultures. If you recognize that the shul is there as a training ground for you to live your life out as a Jew, well then, you won't worry too much how beautiful the synagogue is. You'll worry more how beautiful your life is. And when we forget this, we start to beautify the synagogue to the nth degree. And he decries this. Not that the synagogue shouldn't be nice, but that's not where the emphasis is. And the emphasis is only there when you've missed the point. In a similar way, you have this when it comes to Judaism and feminism. Rav Hirsch develops this in other areas, but wondering why people look at Judaism as being, and not that there aren't questions, there are questions, but in this area here, when Judaism has its absolute focus on the synagogue as being the be-all and end-all of its worldview, then yeah, where's a woman's part within that? And that's a genuine question. But it loses its teeth when you realize that, well, that's not the focal point of a Jew's life. That's like a training ground. In which case, when you take that shift, the discrepancy is far less. So we've spoken about divine worship. And Rav Hirsch points out as well, even at the Beis HaMikdash, when we forgot what the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash was, when we looked at the Beis HaMikdash as being this area of ritual, God was like, I don't want that. Tear your hearts, not your clothes. I didn't ask for these feasts, and I don't want your sacrifices. When you forget the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash, I will take it away from you. And we run the risk of the same thing when we put Judaism in the category of religion. Okay, so we've discussed what Judaism's not, and the dangers of assuming it is. It's not a religion, and when you pretend it is, you suffer for it. In which case, what is Judaism? Well, Judaism is the Torah. What is the Torah? Well, the Rav Hirsch says, well, if we look at the word Torah, it doesn't mean law. It means yara, or hara, which comes from the root to either to teach or to give birth. And Rav Hirsch says this dual meaning is what the Torah is. It's a seed. It's a seed that's implanted, that is planted in the ground, and its product is Israel. The environment matters to produce this type of person. The environment matters for the ideal environment for this seed to grasp root and grow. It is and Rav Hirsch goes through such beautiful metaphors to really dance around what we mean by the Torah. It's the tree of life. It is the part that molds you. It's the part that draws you into this world in a meaningful way. It is the part that it's Jewish life that emerges in front of us. That's what the Torah is, but it is a seed that is planted in our souls to grow out as Yisrael. We are the product of what the Torah is a seed for when we are living the Torah's life out in its correct direction. Doesn't mean we've fulfilled it, we've done it, we've accomplished it. The worst thing is when you think you don't need it anymore because you've mistook what it's supposed to do. It is supposed to produce a certain type of person, and that type of person is supposed to be on the mission of the Jewish people, to be a light to the nations, to be a certain type of person in this world. And the Torah is supposed to develop that type of person, that type of community, that type of society. So if we understand the Torah as being something that is implanted, that is supposed to grow out as what it means to be a Jew in this world, to be on the mission of a Jew in the world and develop the person who is able to live that out to its full, that's Judaism. And that's not a religion. And Rav Hirsch develops this in a beautiful way, that the actual, when he discussed the nature of tradition itself, when people speak about tradition, they think something that's sort of oral and not so grounded. And it's like the Torah does something beautiful. It holds hostage the festival of the Torah in the hands of the oral tradition. In the written law, it doesn't say anywhere about the festival of the giving of the Torah. We only know that because of the oral law. The oral law is central to Judaism in a way that it isn't central in other religions. In other religions, your oral tradition is sort of the whimsical thing that's passed on with the sort of Chinese telephone. Within Judaism, it's not. It's lived by everybody. Everybody is obligated to know it. There's no priestly class here. Everyone had to live it out. It wasn't this abstract thing that was mumbled. It was lived out by people who really cared about it. They cared about it on a religious level. So the nature of the oral tradition itself is holding the key to the festival of the giving of the Torah, because that's the only place we have it. So in which case, let's really ground this in a beautiful symbolism of what actually happened in the Beis HaMikdash. In Eretz Yisrael, the ideal ground for this seed to be planted. There was the Lechem Aponim, and there was the 2 lambs that were bought. So what are we going to do with that? This is really beautiful. And I'll tie this into the conclusion. Why is there no symbol? Back to our original question. Why is there no symbol? Why is there no fanfare when it comes to Shavuos? Because you might think that the fanfare can take the place of your responsibility to live out the Torah. That's what people do. They outsource their inner life to ritual. And there's a danger of that. There's a powerful importance of symbolism and revealed ritual that's supposed to change us when it comes to festivals. But when it comes to the festival of the Torah, you've got to be very careful that you don't outsource it to a ritual, outsource it to a symbol, because then you may forget that no, it's not outsourced here. It's supposed to take your entire life. It is supposed to incorporate your entire life, not 1 week, not one action, but everything. And thereby it's one day. And that's why Shavuos is limited in the way it is. And then Rav Hirsch draws this down to the Lechem Aponim and the Shtei HaLechem. The Shtei HaLechem, let's focus on that. This is paradoxical because we know Chometz has this idea of independence, and on Pesach we had to keep away from Chometz. This is exactly the point, Rav Hirsch tells us. Other worldviews keep you submitted and powerless in the face of the divine. But when it comes to us celebrating the giving of the law, this is when independence is key. Judaism doesn't develop a dependent, sad, pathetic character. On the festival of the law, we emphasize our independence. We emphasize our agency. That is what is given over with bread. The very message that we are keeping away from on the inception of the Jewish people during Pesach is emphasized on Shavuos, because we are living out the mission. We are living out the purpose of the Jewish people. And we take pride in that. And we take further, we take enthusiasm, we take pride in the fact that we are living out our mission as the Jewish people. The focus on independence, the focus on autonomy, the focus on that we are doing this. We are part of this mission. That is a building of confidence, where other worldviews on their most holy days focus on the lowliness of man, the dominion of the gods, the failures of the individual. But on Shavuos, Zman Matan Torasenu, this is a time of joy. This is a time of agency. This is a time of confidence. And thereby, it is Lechem Haponim. And the Lechem Haponim, and the lambs that are bought as a shlamim. Because what is a shlamim? It's harmony. It's peace. It's feeling at one-ment with your relationship with God. That, interwoven with independence, is the message of Shavuos. I'm at peace. I'm in harmony with my relationship with God because I am on my mission. I understand what my mission is. That doesn't mean I've accomplished it. And it's the ever-climbing ladder. But I do it with confidence. But I do it in balance and in oneness with God. Emphasized by the Shlomim. And then just one step further. Rav Hirsch explains that this joy and this confidence, one represents the nation. Yes, we would bring one lechem, one lamb. But Rav Hirsch says when we bring 2, that's a representative of the nation in a communal sense. Yes, the nation is one thing, but when we look at the nation as a multiplicity, we recognize that we aren't standing alone, that our joy is dependent on the joy of our neighbor, that on the one hand we are in this as individuals, but we are also in this as a nation. But more importantly, we are part of this as a nation that is made up of multiple individuals. And Rav Hirsch sees that as the key moral lesson here, that your joy comes when you know your neighbor has as well. Because when it comes to the Shtei HaLechem and the 2 lambs that are bought as a shlamim, not an oila, not a chatos, but something very uniquely Jewish, is shlamim. We're trying to give rise to this idea of independence, confidence, balance with us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our mission. But not only as a nation, but as a nation of discrete individuals, a nation of individuals where this joy, which Rav Hirsch develops about the Bikurim, comes about when we recognize we are together and we are both thriving. So, To recap our structure here, and this has definitely been the longest podcast I've done. What do we have? We have the idea of Judaism being a religion and rejecting that, and the dangerous outflow of thinking Judaism is a religion as it manifests in action, in intellect, in tradition. And Rav Hirsch pushes those to the side and says, what is the Torah? It's not a religion. It is a seed. It is a teaching. It needs to be planted and it develops a Jew. That is the Torah. And on the day of the celebration of the Torah, which its only evidence is in the oral tradition, we are asked to look at it and approach it with independence, with confidence, but in unity and in harmony with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but not as discrete individuals, but as a nation, not only as a nation in abstract, but a nation that's made up of multiplicity, that we think about our neighbor at a time like this, because that is integral to what it means to be a Jew, because you fend away the narcissistic, navel spirituality. It's integral that it's with others. As always, thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful week.